It's Friday once again, which means Fridays in the field. We are just north of Petersburg, Nebraska, where we're meeting up with Dave Warner. Dave is also president of the Central Plains Corn Growers here in Nebraska. They've had a lot of issues this year, and the biggest part of it's been lack of rain and what it means to the crops.
Oh, we've got spots where we're late planting that corn is at knee high, but we also have corn under irrigation that is head high right now, and we're 1 to 2, leaves from tassel. But we also have some dry land in the corners of these same fields that are at the same maturity. So they're going to tassel at shoulder high. So, I mean, we have a lot shorter corn this year. I mean, we've had such intense heat that we have stacked, the collars on top of each other. So this corn, when I was telling guys early that we were at V5, V6 corn, and we had corn this tall, at 1.5 feet, 2 foot, they're like, oh, no, it isn't. I said, yeah, just go out and look. I said, the collars are just stacking right on top of each other. So we are going to have a lot shorter corn this year than we usually do. You can go a long ways out of my scouting area and see poor beans, especially north. South is a lot better. It looks like we're getting canopy right now. We have beans that were planted in April. I'm not kidding you, are still at V5, V6. The ground is so hard, like we did in the corn. The ground is so hard that these roots are not getting down and they're not penetrating. We're not getting a lot of nodules on these beans, so they're not fixing much nitrogen, so they're not growing. They're stressed worse than this corn is. Susan, you can see all the acres you want in beans, but like you said, if we are down 20 to 30% in yield from last year, and that's a very, very good possibility that we will be down 30% in yield. Last year we had some of the highest yields we've ever seen in soybeans. This year could see some of the lowest we've ever seen.
Into the heat of the summer coming in July, these beans need to be canopying by now, and we are way far from that on a lot of these beans. When we start doing that and we're getting a lot of heat reflect off the ground onto these beans, it tends to stun them and they don't grow anymore. And so that's a very big problem that we're going to see probably going into the next 10 days with something like that. So, that's a concern across the board around here. There's not just sporadic fields. It is probably a norm around here, and we talked about that earlier as, this probably being the worst looking beans I've seen in 10 years. Even in 2012, where we went drier later into the year, we still had beans that were canopying back then. So, where we started out here really cool and wet and tried to plant these beans early. And there are a lot of guys around here that planted beans before corn, just for the fact that we thought we could get away with that and plant these beans into the coolness. Because they can handle, beans are very stressful. They can handle something like that way better than corn can. And so planting the beans early like that, we thought, well, we'll get the beans done and we'll wait on the corn to get the temperature to come up a little bit. Well, the beans come up fine. Even through some of the frost, we still had the beans emerge, but that ground got so hard so fast on those beans that they couldn't penetrate with the roots. And some of these beans that were planted late April are no taller than 8-9 inches tall right now. Some of them are not even a foot. And I don't know if we're going to get them any much taller than that, especially on these dryland beans where we're not getting any rain.
We really are not getting into a problem with insects on alfalfa right now, because most of the time, alfalfa weevil, they're 90% water a lot of times. Mm-hmm. Well, it's so hot around here, they can't even survive. So, you look across this field, this was cut, I think, 10 days ago and put up. We're getting this gets rain, this gets pivot run across it here. So, it's getting some moisture, so its regrowth is good. But you see a lot of this dryland hay. I don't know if we'll get another cutting or not off of it. Guys have gotten 2, and that'll probably be it.
How do you stay optimistic? Look at it first from a crop advisor's perspective. How do you find the silver lining, shall we say, and lack of moisture for these guys?
Well, the first thing right now is every week when you come back to that field and this corn's still alive and it's still growing, that's optimism. They are breeding these corns a lot better to take a lot more stress. They can't go without water, the whole season, I know. But, a lot of this corn back in the day would be dead already. It wouldn't take this kind of stress. So, newer genetics and things that we're doing in the corn industry is a huge plus. I don't care what anybody says. They are making strides on this Aquamax corn and on this drought guard, you know, to move this stuff along and to see what we have is very astonishing. So I'm optimistic about that we can maybe get somewhere, you know, in getting a crop. You know, every week is another week gone as that corn is getting more mature. So, you know, that's an optimism. Beans, you know what? Beans will sit there and they'll wait a long time for rain. I've seen beans almost look dead and get an inch and a half of rain, and in a week they're greening back up, and you know, so they're very hardy. They can take a lot of stress. So, you know, that is one thing about beans is we can go and you think you're not going to get a crop at all, and we might get 20 bushel out of them yet. We can still harvest some kind of a crop if we get some rain late. So there is optimism. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, but the overall picture right now is we have to have rain. We need rain, and we need it pretty quickly. You know, the 2-week forecast does not show that around here, and it's going to be hot and dry. So we're just going to have to watch and see how things go, and you know, hopefully those roots on this corn are getting down. There is moisture low. We just got to get the roots into this moisture. So that's our biggest key right now, is hoping these roots push, you know, down into that moisture and it can hold on through this heat wave that we're going to have the next 10 days. You know, the irrigated, just gonna have to keep up watering. You know, most of my guys have been doing really, really well and watering early, so we have the moisture there, so they're not going to get behind. So, which is a good thing, because they're going to need that this next 10 days through this heat and the wind and no humidity.
From just outside of Petersburg, I'm Susan Littlefield on the Rural Radio Network.